Yeah, I'm just gonna make a video. This is gonna be my fucking first one. I'm looking at, hopefully, if I can start doing it on a regular basis, at least reviewing fight cards and maybe build up to fight cards, UFC fight cards, mainly MMA related stuff. I might do other shit as well, but mainly that's what I'd like to make content about. So if you're into it, you're into it. If you're not, you're not. I appreciate you fucking leaving any comments or likes and subscriptions, any of that. Good, bad, whatever. So yeah, let's slap on into it. It's a bit of a heartbreaking one to start on. UFC 294 from the weekend with old Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, the great Volkanovski, coming in on what was it? A couple of weeks, 11 days notice or something to fight Makhachev for the second time. Rematch, obviously they fought back earlier this year, earlier 2023, in a really close fight in Sydney, Aussie, where we all kind of came away thinking, shit, that was far closer in the grappling department on Volkanovski's hand than we'd expected, and far closer in the striking department on Makhachev's side than we'd expected. So the MMA community wanted to see another fight, and we're all stoked when it got switched from Charles Oliveira versus Makhachev to Volk versus Makhachev. And obviously Volk fans, we weren't going to poo-poo him for doing it, because damn, just wanders in with his nuts in a wheelbarrow like, I'm going to take over here, lads. Don't worry, Charles was never going to be here, but I'm here. But it's a shame, because there's no way that you can be competitive against, even if you've fought him before and had a good outcome, regardless if you win or lose. You can't go in there and expect to be competitive against Islam Makhachev or anybody from that gym. Those Dagestani guys, Khabib trained Dagestani guys. You cannot turn up on 11 days notice and expect to be competitive. It's just not going to happen. But yeah, so he wanders in there. He looked a little bit, fluffy, which you can expect coming off the couch. Not to mention he'd come off the surgery earlier in the year after their first fight, something to do with his arm. I think he had some sort of elbow surgery or something like that. So he's already coming off the couch after a surgery, having to fight arguably the pound per pound best fighter in the world, So the outcome isn't that surprising. If you've seen it, Makhachev finished him with a head kick in the first round. And he got him good, like straight across the top of the guard and split his eye open. Volk was done as soon as he hit him with that, some ground and pound to finish it. But I mean, it's almost like, what can you expect? What else was going to happen unless you'd had time to prepare? Obviously, he's got Craig Jones in his corner, one of the world's best grapplers, and possibly, he's getting up there as one of the world's best grappling coaches by the looks, because he's got a massive stable of top-level grapplers in B team, and he seems to be, I'm not 100% sure, but seems to be like the main kind of mastermind behind them as a team. And he was in Volkanovski's corner as his grappling coach, as he is with a lot of those city kickboxing guys. So they devised a mean anti-wrestling plan for their first fight, but so we all knew he was going to be competitive there, but without having that however long leading up with the sparring to sharpen the reaction time and everything to get your eye in, more or less, he didn't have it. So regardless, that might have happened if he'd had a camp, but yeah, so I'm not going to talk too much more about that, because what can you say? But the rest of the card, it was a little bit shit, to be honest. There was obviously it's an Abu Dhabi, so it's got a lot of those Russian guys and a lot of those Islamic from that area of the world guys on the card. And who we got on the curtain raiser in the preliminary card was actually a debut of a guy Shara Magomedov, the Pirate, who's he's been signed with the UFC for supposedly about a year or so, and this was his debut. There's a few speculations or reasons why that could be. One of them being the guy's only got one eye, like eat your heart out, Michael Bisping. He was born with one eye, from what I can gather. His whole career he's fought with one eye, whereas Michael Bisping lost his eye in MMA to a TRT-fueled head kick. But this guy, Shara Magomedov, anyway, debuts against Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva's a guy, he might not be the best in the middleweight division, but, I wouldn't be surprised. He's a bit longer in the tooth as well, so it's a bit late for him to make any changes and be competitive at the top of the weight class. But he's a good fighter, man, In Powhatan, Alex Pereira's early fights in the UFC, I think it was his second fight, or possibly his third, but, they went 3 rounds. Bruno Silva took him to a decision, took Powhatan to a decision, so he's tough and can take a shot. He's actually won me some money, old Bruno Silva, before. Who did he beat? He beat Brad Tavares sometime this year or recently. And Brad Tavares in his prime was probably better than Bruno Silva, never top of the weight class either, but, he put him away. So, Bruno Silva versus Shara Magomedov, I think a lot of people were hoping, especially from this part of the world, that Shara Magomedov was going to come in there and blow the doors off Silva. But it was a pretty competitive fight, eh? So it's be interesting to see old Magomedov going forward. There was a bit of hype behind him, but that might have died down a little bit now after having a competitive fight with a kind of middle of the weight class guy like Bruno Silva. So it'll be interesting to see about Shara Magomedov going forward. The Pirate. He looks like a pirate as well. His highlights out of the UFC are quite flashy. He's got flashing like hook kick knockouts, and so it'll be interesting to see. What do we got after that? We had Victoria Dudikova versus Jinyu Fry, catchweight bout. I think Jinyu Fry missed weight by quite a substantial amount. I could be wrong there. Also mirrored with staph infections in unforeseen places on the body that supposedly the Middle Eastern Abu Dhabi doctors didn't pick up on, understandably, but that wasn't the only staph infection on the card. Supposedly it was rife with things slipping past the doctors, and then the doctors getting in the cage and ruining fights while they were going. So we had Victoria Dudikova winning a decision in a reasonably not overly entertaining fight, but they got in there and did the job. But next on the list, we've got Mike Bradeen versus Ansul Jubli. Excuse my pronunciation. Ansul Jubli debuting with quite a lot of hype behind him from that area of the world as well. He came out and he put it on Mike Breeden early on. Looked really sharp. Mike Breeden, I think he obviously had a cut leading into the fight that had been sewn up and obviously healed over, but not enough to survive the fight. So he got split open early. It was like, I think the commentators said it looked like he had a third ear hanging off the side of his head or something, because it was just a flap of skin hanging off the side of his head. There's a lot of talk from the commentary team about that. Anyway, he got cut open early and looked like he was going to be finished. Survived the first round. I think they cut his third ear off in the corner and he went back out there. I think he got deuced up in the second round as well. But anyway, he survived that. Comes out in the third round and starts barking in Jubilee's face and screaming USA, and just marches him down, lands heavy shots and ends up finishing him TKO. That was impressive. That was definitely the highlight of the preliminary card. Go back and watch that if you've got Fight Pass. That's definitely worth a watch. Mike Breeden getting the win. there was a few, the crowd over there aren't happy at this point because there's been a few guys that have had a lot of hype that they've been hoping have been going to blow the doors off people that have kind of fallen a bit short. I actually skipped one there. We've got Muhammad Namov versus Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood, I think, dropping down a weight class or in a change of weight class recently after having trouble in different weight classes with his debut, coming out of the UK. Quite a touted fighter in the debut of his, in the early stages of career. He's had a bit of a bad run though, but he's entertaining, highly skilled. He just had, this fight's an example. He just has bad luck. So anyway, he had a lot of bad luck in this fight. Fouls for days. I think he got kicked in the nuts in the first round, like really badly, but didn't take the 5 minutes. Wanted to get back into it, So I think he might have taken a minute or something after a bad cup shot and then jumped back into the fight. So obviously on the back foot in the first round, loses the first round. Close though, he's still obviously competitive. Then in the second round, again gets kicked in the nuts badly. And the doctor does nothing, People are, the commentary team at that time are kind of like throwing around the idea that there should be a point deducted. Obviously that doesn't happen, but Nathaniel Wood is definitely on the back foot now. 2 heavy cup shots, still fighting, good fight, competitive, but probably loses that round as well. From memory, comes out again, obviously on the back foot. There was other fouls that the referee did nothing about. I think he was grabbing the gloves and the clinches and that type of thing. Anyway, he loses. I think he debatably could have won the third round. He was kind of coming on in the third, but he loses a decision. Unfortunate for Nathaniel Wood. He's on a bit of a skid now. But yeah, he's a good fighter, man. I like watching Nathaniel Wood fight. It's unfortunate that he's gone on a bit of a skid. And then we've got Sadiqus Dumas, tall African American guy, versus Abdul Azaitar, which is another fight just rife with fouls. I can't comment on it much. It was, it was close from memory, but didn't stick in my mind, other than the fact that Abu Azaitar fully just grabbed one of Dumas's dreadlocks and just and the ref mentioned anything, but it was just the whole card, especially the undercard, was just rife with fouls that, it was a bit unfortunate really. Speaking of rife with fouls, so we've got Javad Basharat versus Victor Henry. No contest, accidental groin kick. So I think, again, multiple groin shots and then a groin shot that was bad enough that the guy, Victor Henry, couldn't continue afterwards. And what made it worse, to add insult to injury, this guy is in there, unable to compete, unable to do anything but roll around on the ground crying, and the doctor has the nerve to come in there and say, "I don't think you got kicked down there, mate. It looked like you got kicked in the leg." And old mate Victor Henry, I don't know if he swore at him, but he almost did. He disagreed with the doctor anyway. Said, "Nah, mate, it got everything down there." And it's unfortunate because on the replays, if you watch the replay, they showed multiple different angles and they kept saying, "Oh, this is a good angle, this is a good angle," which they didn't have a good angle of it, unfortunately. But it did look, from the shots they had, like it hit him on the inside of the leg rather than in the cup. But that's a still shot, you can't tell what momentum was doing and what happened in those small areas, So he's obviously on the ground, incapacitated. He has to get carried out of the ring almost, and the doctors go, "Nah, I reckon you got kicked in the leg, mate," which was unfortunate for Victor Henry. Then we've got the GOAT. We've got Trevor Peake defeats Muhammad Yahya. spelt differently than Ronnie Yahya, but Muhammad Yahya versus Trevor Peek. Trevor Peek, famous for the overhand shots, which, how effective they are, who knows, but how entertaining they are, they're very, very entertaining when you see some guy just wailing on someone standing with hammer fists. Although we didn't see that in this fight. Trevor Peek actually grappled. I think he'd get the body lock and then scoop out a leg and take him down against the cage, and I'm not sure, he's obviously a reasonably good grappler, old Trevor Peek, or he managed to make it work for him in this fight, and he kind of defeated Muhammad Yahya, who was also another debuting fighter from this area, I think, quite easily. Well, he did the job, I think everyone was a little bit gutted that Trevor Peek didn't give us the old Trevor Peek standing hammer fists, but got the job done, so you can't complain. And then, being an early morning card, this was over here in New Zealand we had to be up at 7 a.m. for the main card, but this one here I got up to watch this because this is a good fight. This actually good matchup as well, good matchmaking. Islam Makhachev, who's undefeated in the UFC, coming out of UK, but I think he, if not Dagestani born, he grew up there and trained wrestling there as a kid for a long time. So he's got that wrestling base from the Russian hills, Russian mountain wrestling, but he's from the UK. I think he's competed for the UK as a wrestler, but anyway, he's a top level grappler. In his last fight, he got caught in a knee bar and the guy was just cranking, had his leg like a banana, and something popped. I think his leg popped and he didn't tap, made it, got out of it and beat the guy. I think he submitted him, ground and pound. But he does tend to get caught, He likes to get in the scrambles and engage in these grappling, and he rates his own grappling so much, which is obvious why, because he's amazing, that he seems to get caught in things. Because Tim Elliott in this fight, who was also known for inviting the scrambles and is an amazing scrambler, competed, one of Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson's most competitive fights in his title run in the UFC was against Tim Elliott. So, Tim Elliott's top caliber for the lower weight classes, although he's getting a bit longer in the tooth now. Anyway, Tim Elliott, he caught him in a couple of deep guillotines, man, from the bottom. But, again, it's alright if it's a guillotine because you just got to go to sleep or whatever, but he wasn't going to tap to this multiple guillotines. I think the first one was probably the tightest, and he got out of it. He got out of both of them, but he seems to get caught in a lot of shit anyway. And then I didn't see the cards, I can't tell you the score myself, but I've heard people talk about the fact that, he was losing on the judges' scorecards going into the third round. And, he finished him in the third round. Arm triangled him. Makhachev did. Arm triangled Elliott, but, going into the third he was losing. If he hadn't managed to pull that off, which I'm sure he knew he could, and he did, he would have gone into to the judges probably losing that fight, so Muhammad Makhachev on a bit of a tear here, the start of his UFC career, but he's probably got to watch getting caught in those submissions as he advances through the division, because even if you don't tap, if your leg pops mid-fight, you don't always survive. So that was the preliminary card, which was interesting. I wouldn't go back and watch it unless you want to talk shit on YouTube about it, but other than that. And then going into the main card, we had Saeed Nurmagomedov, which I'm not sure of relation to Khabib, but I think he trains with those guys. Defeats Munin Gafarov, submission, guillotine choke. It was like the power guillotine or the ninja choke, which people call it, which is once you sink that in, there's not much you can do about that. So we got that on him in the first round. It's pretty quick submission there, impressive. So that gets the main card kicked off. Then we have Ikram Aliskerov versus Vali Alves. And Ikram Alaskarov, he's one to watch at the middleweight division. His only loss is to Khamzat Chimaev. And Khamzat himself says that Ikram was his, not Gilbert Burns, says that Ikram was his biggest test in his career so far. Their fights, it's a really good fight out of the UFC. I think it may have been Chimaev's last fight before signing with the UFC. And they had a back and forth bit of a war, and Chimaev managed to knock him out. It's on Chimaev's highlight reel. I'm sure you may have all seen it. He knocks him out with a massive uppercut in the middle of the ring. But Ikram, he's good, man. Got Wally Alvarez, who was kind of marched in there as a bit of a sacrificial lamb, to be fair, against this guy, who I'm sure they're kind of hoping is going to have a bit of a run. So yeah, he got hit with a flying knee, finished with punches. So he's one to watch, old Ikram Alaskarov. And then the MMA gods have been watching this card very closely for these top three fighters. We got Johnny Walker, Kamaru Usman, and who was on the card previously, Charles Oliveira, who have got interesting histories as far as fights and weight misses and just crazy stuff going on in their fights. So Johnny Walker versus Magomed Ankalaev, who Ankalaev has been someone who most people have regarded as the best in the light heavyweight division for quite a long time. He lost early in his career to Craig Jones in the UFC, to a last minute, not Craig Jones, Paul Craig, who was a grappler from the UFC. Paul Craig caught him in a triangle last minute after getting dominated. Paul Craig, he caught the other lightweight who just had to renounce his title from injury. What's his name? Old mate. Jamal Hill, he caught him in a triangle as well. So Paul Craig's known for triangles from underneath. He caught Magomed Ankalaev in a triangle and finished him after Magomedov was dominating him for a whole 3 rounds. He lost. And Magomedov, in his other fight, he fought Jan Blachowicz for the vacant light heavyweight title, and they went to a draw. So he's also got a history of odd things happening in fights. Anyway, Magomed hits Johnny Walker with an illegal knee. I think Johnny Walker's hands were down and he kneed him in the head. Anyway, it wasn't that bad. You've seen worse where the guy's obviously concussed and can't continue, but Johnny Walker seemed to be reasonably lucid. He's a bit of a space cadet as it is, so he was doing silly things that didn't tell the doctor what the doctor wanted to hear. Supposedly told the doctor that he was in the desert, which they were in the desert. He's not wrong, as Dana White said, but the doctor wasn't happy with that answer, and the doctor waved it off. So that's an illegal knee. No contest. Johnny Walker didn't understand after that either. He thought the fight was still going, and they had to get security and Dana White in there to calm him down and get him out of the cage. But that was an unfortunate end to what could have been an entertaining fight. And this was probably the best fight from the card. I guess the most talking points from both sides. We got Chimaev coming in against Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman having taken the fight on 11 days' notice, same as Volkanovski, after Paulo Costa had to pull out with what was a brutal staph infection that he had to have operated on in his arm. So it's understandable that he couldn't fight. Khamzat versus Paulo Costa, after this fight, that would have been very competitive if Costa was in good shape, which I'm sure he would have been if the arm had held up. But so Chimaev comes out the gate, as everyone knew he would, storms out the gate, puts Usman on the ground. He's trouble in the first round, Chimaev. But Kamaru Usman, seasoned fighter, top-notch grappler, was able to survive. Khamzat on his back, threatening the choke, RNC from behind. There wasn't much ground and pound, nothing that did a hell of a lot of damage. Didn't manage to cut him open or anything, but clear 10-8 round to Chimaev in the first round. But he comes out in the second round, doesn't manage to take him down. I think he shoots a few times, is unable to take him down. He mentioned after the fight come out of his camp that he may have broken his hand, Chimaev, in the first round, so that may answer why his grappling wasn't as effective. But anyway, as the fight progresses, 3-round fight, it would have been super interesting if it was a 5-rounder. Fight progresses, and Usman slowly starts to find the mark, starts to stuff Khamzat's takedowns, land those straight shots. Whitman's got Usman firing on all cylinders with the jab. He hasn't got a massive array of striking skills like Israel Adesanya or Yair or any of these other really top-notch fighters, but what he does really well. Those straight jabs and shots down the pipe, like he knocked out Street Jesus with Jorge Masvidal, which was a beautiful KO. So Kamaru Usman starts landing these straight shots, and Khamzat starts, whether it's to do with his broken hand, could be something to do with it, but he seems to fade as the fights go on. He comes out the gate, all cylinders firing, and then slowly as the fights go on, he seems to lose a bit of steam. Now, it would have been super interesting if this was a 5-rounder. I think Usman probably would have got him in this fight if it was a 5-rounder, especially if his hand was broken. But yeah, anyway, Khamzat wins it. Decision, majority. One of the judges had Kamaru for the dub. But yeah, so it'll be really interesting. There was talks of whoever won that getting a shot at Strickland for the middleweight belt. I don't know if that's still going to be the case after that performance. It could be. But yeah, the UFC does funny things, Whatever they say before the fight is not always the same after the fight, depending on what happens, So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Kamaru hangs around in the middleweight. We all know Izzy's chilling for a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see if Kamaru is willing to take fights at middleweight now. I can imagine he definitely would have fought for the belt if he had the chance, but that might not be on the table now. He'd probably have to at least get one win in the division before there was talks of a title fight. Although him and Strickland have fought in the past, so there's a storyline there and a bit of a path for Kamaru to that title if Izzy's not around in middleweight. And then, yeah, like I'd said earlier, poor old Volkanovski against Islam. Awesome performance by Islam. He is good, man. He's a very good striker. To do that to Volk, who we all know, the trilogy with Max, the best boxer in the UFC, and if the fight had gone on, maybe Volk would have had a bit more luck as he kind of found his range and got his game going, but he didn't have the chance because Islam, I think it was probably a progression from he was landing heavy body shots, heavy single kicks in the first fight. So I can imagine they'd spotted that and developed and gone on from there and saw the chance for the head kick, which he took it and he put him away. It's unfortunate for Volk. Still the champion of his weight class though, so you can't take that away from him. What a G, stepping up to fight Islam again, 11 days notice. So it's unfortunate he may not get that chance again in the future, who knows. But yeah, UFC 294. Interesting card, could have been better, probably not as good as we'd expected or hoped, but yeah. If you enjoyed that, motherfuckers, like and subscribe, and